Well, shalom. Welcome. This is week 7. Like I said, pretty amazing. This is the Peshat. And as it's the 7th. And in honor of the 7th, I'm going to teach on the book of Revelation. I'm going to begin to unpack it a little bit. In 450 videos that I've had on YouTube for over 7 years, I have never taught on Revelation. I look at that book and I just have thrown up my, because it is so highly apocryphal. It's an apocalyptic apocalypse. Those are the big words, meaning it is a book that talks about the ages, the end of the age. That's its apocalyptic part. And then apocalypse means it's written in a very hidden, again, cryptic, again, soul level. And I have just been so busy trying to just get the keys and the broader context of how they're used in the rest of the writings before I thought I would ever try Revelation. But I'm going to give it a try. But we're on the Peshat. So actually what I just want to talk, and I want to try to do this a lot quicker because last week, I don't know, I talked an hour and a half of the Peshat, and I apologize, but I wanted to get out everything that I had in my understanding about the books, the writing. You know, we are people of the book. That appellation we can bring upon ourselves, just like Judah always calls themselves that. Because truly, the book of God, Yahweh's revelation to us, the Torah, is what our rule for all faith and godliness. So in the book of Revelation, to go into a little bit of history from two aspects, what type of writing the book is, and a little bit of its historical, touching a little bit on the canonicity of it, and also an interesting, and I don't know if any of you guys have ever even heard this before. This is kind of very, very cutting edge, deep understanding, which I hope will make a lot of sense, because the presuppositions in which you bring to your Torah, I mean, let's just say if you're a dispensationalist, when you go to read the New Testament, that's what you're going to see. I mean, I think even modern psychology proves that. The filter that we use is truly the way in which our eye, our mind, our spiritual eye sees, and the way our spiritual ear interprets it back to us. So, but I'm going to take on 3 of the biggest presuppositions that people have when they talk about the book of Revelation, well, the New Testament and the book of Revelation in particular. So the first thing, the early Christian church, I have a couple of quotes that I'm going to just try to read verbatim to keep it simple. Did you know, okay, that the early followers of Yeshua, you know, I like to say church, but really it's not the word kyrios, which means a building. It is this body of people, these returning lost sheep who heard the message, heard the word of the Lord, and came back into the covenant relationship. That this group of early church followers for well over 100 years was led by a group called the Desposyni. And let me write that down, Despos. YNI, those are weird words. Okay, the Desposyni. Who are the Desposyni? Okay, now it means belonging to the Lord. It's a Greek word, but what it means is those that are belonging to the Lord. And that also has the intonation that they are descendants of King David, King David. Now we know Yeshua, if anything, what he was in his lineage, he was a prince of David, right? He had to come from that line. To be the king, you would have to come from that royal priestly or royal lineage. So there's 3 major ways in which people approach this lineage of Yeshua, okay? One, and I consider this to be a heresy, I'll tell you right up front, but it's very popular today, and to me it's a total distortion of the Desposyni. But so just let me tell you, Desposyni, what it means is the early church was its leadership, designated, ordained leadership was from the family of Yeshua, his larger clan family. And I showed you the first one, I believe was on the Transfiguration, where I was doing some of the lineages. And when I talked about James and John, the sons of Zebedee, these sons of thunder, these weren't people that were coming out of nowhere. They were not some obscure little Galileans. They were hardcore lineage of generational followers of and Desposyni. Okay, so they're first the heresy, and you all know this guy Dan Brown, right? And the Holy Grail. The whole thinking out there, there is one whole line of thinking that you can follow, very popular today, that Yeshua had a wife that he married, Mary Magdalene, and that he had children. All right, and so his Desposyni would not only be people like his mother Mary or his brothers and sisters, which the New Testament clearly delineates, but now he has a wife and he has children. Okay, now I'm not even going to, I don't really just ascribe to that. Okay, I've done a lot of research on it, and there's no, first of all, there's no ancient text. All right, there's a thread you can follow, but and I'll tell you a little secret. I have followed a lot of these Freemasons who love that Desposyni concept. And I have seen in the text, literally from their own writings, where they literally change the text to fit their narrative. A deeper, as you can see, I mean, it's just astounding that someone would be that cavalier. And they insert these insinuations and these behavior patterns upon the holy Desposyni. But that's another whole. So, I mean, I have seen it. So I just wanted to say that. But anyways, the Bible never mentions that Yeshua had a wife or children, right? We know he had a mother, right? His father was Joseph, which, again, that's wouldn't go down that road there per se, but he had brothers and sisters, all right? It's his statement, according to the statement that says, by his own words, he says, the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. This would seem to indicate that he was not maintaining a family. Usually, if someone is married, they have a marriage bed. They have a place to lay their head, all right? His whole itinerant ministry would indicate to me that he did not have that. I mean, we're told that Peter and Paul had a wife and they could take their wife. They didn't have to take their wife, you know, the whole thing. But in this instance with Yeshua, there really is no record of it. But there are indications to me that would make a lot of sense that he did not. Also because of him being, quote unquote, the Son of God. We are his bride, all right? He didn't have, in my opinion, the earthly bride because he had a much larger mission, all right? So this also, it seems that at the cross, when Yeshua asked John to take care of his mother, there's a very famous verse in John 19, 26 and 27, that he said nothing about taking care of a wife or children. It would be extremely odd to leave that out. I mean, personally, you really would put the wife and the children ahead of the mother in terms of taking care of. So these are just some indications, but you know, hey, you do your own research. That's but that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Now, the other one, the other presupposition is really and truly the Gentile understanding, sort of the Western Greek mindset we have, especially here in the West, that somehow we've made Yeshua, the Jewish rabbi, with his Essene clan into a Gentile, seriously, almost convert to this new religion. So, and that's where most of the connections have been lost and severed. And that's why it gets very confusing, because the people who've kept our text, New Testament text by and large, has been this quote unquote Gentile church. That, and I will show you where in around 200 years, the Desposyni, the true family of Yeshua, who was given the authority by Yeshua himself, and amongst themselves, that's how the Essenes ruled themselves. They were a clan of people. And if you came into this clan, you know, you had to show a lot of loyalty. Let's put that way. But so let me go on to this. It says, so that I just want to make that connection. I don't think that we can find the true lineage in the Gentile writings on the early church. The one group of writings that gives us, in my opinion, the most accurate understanding is the Dead Sea Scrolls. Because the Dead Sea Scrolls do not belong really to the Jews, and they don't really belong to the Christians. They're this kind of group of people who each side claims a little bit of, but they're so unique in their writings, in their orientation, in their lifestyle, it's very hard to have either camp totally own them. So now I want to read you something, this little bits of this. There is I don't know if you guys are aware of this guy. He has a very interesting story. He's presently passed on. It's an interesting story. I mean, I think he, by his own admission, must say he was murdered, but all right, for being an outspoken speaker within the Roman Catholic Church and some of their things in, I think, the late 90s. But he had this, he was very onto the Desposyni, this concept. So there was a meeting in 318, okay, between Pope Sylvester, if you want to look some of these records up, it's Pope Sylvester, okay, and what is known is they're saying probably one of the oldest Christian Jews still alive at the time, Josces, Josces. Okay, there's this, we don't actually have the fragment to verify this, but there's a lot of writings about this meeting. Okay, so I'm going to read you this. There was a very vital interview between Pope Sylvester I, he's the first one, and Jewish, all right, Christian leaders. They were Jewish Nazarene would be a better word, leaders, took place in 318. So we're 300 years removed. The vital interview was not, as far as we know, recorded, but issues were very well known. And it's likely that this gentleman spoke on behalf of the Jewish Nazarenes, which we'll call them. He spoke on the behalf of the Desposyni. All right. He said that this group, the Desposyni, had the most respected, were the most respected by all believers in the first century and a half of Christian history. The word literally means belonging to the Lord, and it is uniquely reserved for Jesus's, Yeshua's blood relatives. Now, each of these had traditional family names. We see these in a lot of our texts. Zechariah, Joseph, John, James, Joseph, Simeon, Matthias. But there was, well, I don't even go into that. Neither Sylvester nor any of the 32 popes before him. So 300, we'd already had 32 popes before that. Those succeeding him ever emphasized that there were at least 3 well-known authentic lines of legitimate blood descent from Yeshua's own family. In other words, they did not say that there was not at least 3 known bloodline generations that had still were coming from Yeshua's family. Now, the Desposyni demanded that Sylvester, in this meeting, who now had Roman patronage, revoke his confirmation of the authority of the Greek Christian bishops at Jerusalem. In Antioch, in Ephesus, and in Alexandria, and those are all major cities of learning and Jewish scholarship at the time, like Alexandria, Philo of Alexandria. Philo was hundreds of years established at this point. Antioch, another very old and established city of learning, Jewish learning. And to name the Desposyni in the place of those bishops, to name Desposyni, to take their place. They asked that the practice of sending cash to Jerusalem as the mother church be resumed. Now we know that Paul did that. That's what he was doing. You know, when he was collecting, he was going through the church and he had a bag and he was collecting money for what? For the church in Jerusalem, the mother church. That was a very well-established practice amongst the early followers. So these blood relatives of Yeshua demanded the reintroduction of the law, which included the Sabbath keeping, the holy day system of feasts and new moons, and many of the other Hebrew and many of the other, early, we could see this early practices we still see in the New Testament, that the followers like Paul, a lot of these early followers of the way were still practicing. So, but this Pope Sylvester dismissed their claims and said that from now on, the mother church was in Rome. See, this is, again, took about 300 years. See, that you can see this conflict, this tension growing, this huge Gentile wellspring now, and they want their own leadership, their people to be in leadership, right? Obviously. And the Desposyni say, no, this is a historic outgrowth. Yeshua was a Jew. This is a historic outgrowth. We have reserved the right. So, apostolic succession is a big deal, but if you don't really understand the different presuppositions that people bring to the table, it's hard to ferret it out. Sorry. So what the point is that Sylvester shut it down. He said he insisted that the Greek bishops lead them, and this was the last known dialogue with the Sabbath-keeping church in the East, led by the disciples who was descended from blood relatives of Yeshua, the Messiah. So you can see how early on, by 300 at least, it was done. The Gentiles had captured the imagination of their followers. They had put their leadership in place, and now they were going to begin to write the books, canonize things, everything according to their perception, their presuppositions. Okay, but we know that that's not the end of the story. Now, that just to me is giving a little bit of a sort of an understanding of what was going on. Because I don't think as Christians, we just think it was a very nice cut and dry thing, and we replaced, this is what I mean, we replaced Jerusalem as the center for the mother church. It went to Rome, and then we just went happily on for 1800 years. All right, but now we're coming back and understanding maybe that really wasn't the way it was supposed to be. So now I want to take this now into the concept, okay, so the book of Revelation. It is a unique book. There is no book like it outside of Daniel, and then you have to get outside of the canon, that the Septuagint into some of these books like the book of Enoch. It is definitely in a sod level work. And I remember last week I was trying to explain how you have to understand your book. Is it in the genre of history? Is it exoteric or esoteric? Revelation is extremely esoteric, very hidden, very coded. Is it a moral ethical book? No, it's really not. Is it history? No, it is really not. And when people keep trying to, take this book that is about, in my opinion, it is the whole battle of the ages in an interdimensional way, starting from the get-go of it. You can't squeeze it in a generation. You can't squeeze it into the time of the destruction of the first temple, and you certainly can't squeeze it into the last generation before the return of Yeshua. It is a book that demands expanse because of the way the keys, the words are coded and used. So that we can put in its kind of context there. So perhaps one of the reasons, see, it's funny because the early church, up until about 300, had no problem with the book of Revelation. It was one of the first books outside of the four gospels to be absolutely kept in, quote unquote, the writings. And the early church, the reason, right, was because the early church fathers, and let me give you some of these if you're an early church follower. The greatest reason why is it's canonical, and it's always won out in this argument in terms of its authenticity, because around 300, many people wanted to take it out of the canon, and parts of the canon world today did take it out for many hundreds of years, okay? But the greatest reason is because of its authenticity, that most of the early church fathers, or actually all of the early church fathers, considered this John to be the same as one of the sons of Zebedee, the sons of thunder, John and James. So as I said in the first week, these people were Desposyni. Nobody doubted the authenticity that book was written by John, the son of thunder, who was a cousin of Yeshua, because his mother, Salome, was a sister of Mary, his mother. See, it's one of my biggest issues to understand. These are a clan of people, and they have a destiny and a mission. They are not weak. Now, a lot of those that go on and stay in the clan are not weak-minded people. Praise Adonai. These are the remnant that stay strong no matter what the persecution. So he is on this island of Patmos around 90, 95. Most people. So the fact that it is all the church fathers, and we're talking about Polycarp, who was a disciple of John, the same John, attested to its veracity. Irenaeus Hippolytus wrote and exegeted it out of it. They used it for their exegesis, which assumed that they assumed it was a legitimate book. Justin Martyr, who was the disciple of Polycarp, quotes it. So here you have Polycarp, who's a disciple of James, and then Justin Martin, who's a disciple of Polycarp. So you have a definite, you can go from lineage stream to lineage stream. Okay, this is oral, and many of this, I tried to that a lot of this oral understanding is being passed down disciple to disciple. So, and even Jerome states his authorship and includes it in the Vulgate. Okay, so now Hippolytus of Rome in 170 to 235 confirms the typing of the writing. And again, he says, John, this is a direct quote, John, again in Asia, was banished by Domitian the king to the Isle of Patmos, in which he wrote his gospel and saw the apocalyptic vision, and in Trajan's time, 98 to 117. So what a historian would do, he would look at it and he would go back and check, well, yeah, Domitian was the king at this time, and it was also in Trajan's time. So you can document it within a window, and it puts here 198, 117. So that, in my opinion, there's some really pretty heavy authoritative witnesses to its veracity. So, because one of the clear-cut requirements for any book to be in the New Testament, and this is even in the Old Testament, one of the things in the Old Testament is that they had to find, the book had to have been written originally in Hebrew. And that's one of the things that's so interesting about the Dead Sea Scrolls. I said, those books, there's like almost no, and I'm pretty sure I'm still right on this, that there was no books found in Greek or written in Sumerian or anything. They are Hebrew books, okay? So their authenticity, they have authenticated, for most people's minds, the Old Testament books, because we know those were alleged to have been written in Hebrew, and now we find books of the time written in Hebrew. But in the same thing for the New Testament, the canon had to have an apostolic pedigree. The book had to have been written either by one of the apostles, and Paul was considered an apostle. He says it himself. He is recognized and witnessed to as an apostle, and he is someone who worked closely with the apostles, like Mark or Luke. Books that were just, now this is where it gets interesting, because if you study out the canon, it's very interesting. There were books in, books out, and I showed you the different canons. So we go from, 66 that we have, and I think the Ethiopian canon had not ended up with 96. That's a big, 30 different books still in dispute there. So, but the books that were mostly disputed all the time were like 1st and 2nd Peter, Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd John, and Jude. And if you look at that, those are all books that you could reputedly say were written by Desposyni. All right, Hebrew written by James. All right, James the Just was the brother of Yashua. He was the patriarch. He was the leader of the early church in Jerusalem. I mean, it's very established history. It's in the book of Acts. You really can't dispute it. And all these books, we know Jude was one of his brothers. John is one of his cousins. All right. Peter was, and I bet you if we had the records, we're probably related by marriage, because Peter was a business partner in the fishing business between John and Zebedee, or John and James, the sons of Zebedee. So Zebedee and Peter were in fishing business together. That's why you have the story up there. They were fishing together in the same boat. So we got to stop, put the puzzle pieces together. So the greatest, so I think I said all that. Now, the last thing I want to cover here to set the stage is the type of writing it is. All right. The book of Revelation is a genre of mystical Jewish writings called Torah Hasod. This is one I haven't used on you guys yet. I tell you, I'm just teaching the Sod. Okay, so when we're in the Patreon, I have the 3 levels. This is the Bashat, but I hope all the Sod people who listen to this to start to set the stage to build up to the sod. But the sod means mystery, right? There's another word even there. It's called the Torah HaSod. And what that means is like an even embedded deeper meaning. So there is a mystery of the sod. So not only do you have the sod, which is of the mysteries, a deep embedded understanding, there is even inside of that a deeper understanding. So the book of Revelation, like I said, isn't even Torah HaSod. It is the secret of the secrets in the book of Revelation. So as such, it cannot properly be interpreted without an understanding of the concepts and terminology involved in this form of study and writing. You need the keys. That's the whole, you have to have the keys in which to properly unlock that book. It is a sealed text. I'm sorry, I just hope the Father would let me say that into a large audience of people who just want, these YouTubers who just want to bump their gums and think that I think it's so disingenuous when you really understand and appreciate the scriptures and how they're written, that you can just make stuff up and you don't even understand the genre of writing that we're talking about, something that is so, and that John had a mystical vision, and that this level, he was in a scene, these people had such a level of being able to meditate and get into the presence, the literal throne room of Yahweh, where they could literally see down time. They were in the realm where there is no time. That's why I say the book it spans interdimensional and it's intertime. Because the level that he is receiving and seeing this vision and understanding from the triumph of the people of the book from the beginning to the end is really what it's all about. And the final lock up and lock down of Amalek, Hasatan, whatever epithet you want to put on him. Okay, so this is the type of writing we're dealing with. The book of Revelation, it's ultimately, due to 1900 years of Gentile control of the text, this too is this understanding has gotten lost. And the thing is because much of the church, when they lost the keys, when they separated themselves in 318, just like it says in Paul Title, do not get haughty, because, I can kind of understand it, because listen, they had the numbers. The early church, the whole point of it was they were going to win in the numbers game. Judah and the remnant has always been a remnant. But because the lost sheep had so multiplied out there, this huge group of Gentiles that was going to come in, millions and millions and millions. Yes, I can understand that there's a leadership issue that's going to emerge quickly. But that, unfortunately, because of pride and arrogance and all sorts of different human nature things, we threw the baby out with the bathwater. Instead of retaining the knowledge, retaining the understanding, so much so. So it became a book that really, by about 300, it came into such question as to its authenticity because nobody could interpret it. It became almost like a book of fantasy, because who can make sense of it? It's not at the Peshat level. I have a statement here. Along with the methodology of the church had become very liturgical and very Peshat. And so Revelation had a hard time finding a home and an audience after that had happened. But another issue that's going on with the book of Revelation, and with, again, a lot of the other pseudographias, right, is because at this time, once 70 AD had happened, the Romans came in, they raised the temple, and the exile started in earnest, all right? For fear of the Romans, we think the early church went underground for fear of the Jews. Well, the Jews went underground for fear of the Romans. They hunted down, there were incredible massacres, tortures, atrocities against the Essenes, against, you should Google it sometime. It's something, the story is called the 10 Martyrs. I mean, this is one of the most incredible, I hope I spelled that right, 10 Martyrs. Okay, Rabbi Akiva, a lot of these early incredible the sages at the time of Yeshua, many of them believing in him and understanding, were torturously murdered by the Romans. It's a very gruesome story. So this is so you go underground with your writings. That's why a lot of the names sort of would change, and it's kind of hard to piece together who is who historically for people who really get into the history of it. But we can see that today happening. Look at what's happened just in the last 2 years with people with just the censorship that we're seeing. Things are getting scrubbed. People's information is getting taken down. I mean, so much information that could be lost forever, because unless we have a complete flip, we can flip this thing, this situation, and people have to go underground. So it's not an unheard of, in history repeats itself. When the winner is evil and the winner is ruling with that by brute force, it's a very difficult time for the saints. So that's another reason why we have this book that is so heavily coded, and it's hard to a lot of the players and stuff. But so I want to say words in there like the whore of Babylon, the beast, the false prophet, and I'll tell you, no other book in the Bible has so many numerical usages, sevens. So I said 7 on week 7. I'm going to take on the 7th. Now this is just the Mashiach sort of laying the groundwork for the history, kind of put the book in its context. But next week in the Remezes, I'm going to show you what some of these hints are really referring to. Okay, and it'll be quite astounding. And then we'll go into some of the Torah HaSod in the Sod. But I just want to leave you with this, and this is so obvious, where I'll give you 2 examples where when you just have a cursory understanding of Hebrew, of the letters, and how the things are put together. There's a verse in Revelation. In Revelation 8, verse, it's verse 8, and I don't know, I think it's Revelation 1, verse 8. It says, Yeshua says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. Now, let me just say, if you even just read the first book of Revelations, right, and you look at that language and everything, that is the transfigurated Yeshua. There's no difference between that language and we're talking about this image of the celestial Son of God on the Mount of Transfiguration and what is portrayed in the book of Revelation. And if John, again, same God, was on the Mount of Transfiguration, having the same experience with the same God, Son of God, in this vision on the Isle of Patmos, it makes perfect sense. But it says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God, who is and was and is to come, the Almighty. Okay, well, if you know your Hebrew, obviously, and most people notice the Alpha and the Omega, that's Greek for the first letter, the Aleph, and the last letter, the Tav. And if you were to look it up in Greek, we know that the word, the first is the word Rishon in the Greek. It means Rosh, it means first. So we're talking, he is the word. What other epithet would he use to describe himself, right? He is the written Torah. He is the word. I am the Alpha and I am the Tav and everything in between. So the word 314 Tav was this word, it's used, it's the word Arharon, 314 in your Strongs, and it means the last or the rear. All right. So again, it's easy to piece this stuff together when you have an understanding how the Greek, when we're really dealing with the Hebrew text, he is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and the end. He is the written Torah. And they're not some dry words, right, on a page. Now, the other one to say, there's a big thing in here on 666, okay? Well, when you understand that it's a Hebrew book, he would have written this in Hebrew. And when you get to the Gematria, that's something that you can easily pull over to the Gematria. So it's 600, all right, 666, all right? Well, 6 is the Vav. The Vav is the first 6. So you take 6, which is a Vav, right? Plus 60, right here, which is a Shemek. That's 60, right? I'll just make my Shemek there. And 600, which again is 400 plus 200. You gotta, the way they add is they add the numerical value of the letters together. So you have plus 400 plus 200 equals 666, 666. And I guarantee you we'll get that in the Talach Hasod, what that, according to those letters, is referring to. To me, there's no other way to break that code down, and that's what we'll do. So I hope that you enjoyed that, and I will see you again in the Remez. Shalom, shalom.